Syria's government has announced that it will extend a 4-day ceasefire with Kurdish fighters for 15 days. The two sides have been fighting since early January, when Damascus launched an offensive to bring the Kurdish-administered region back under its control.
It has been a fateful January for Syria's Kurds. For more than a decade, the Kurdish-led SDF was the closest US ally in Syria, partners in the battle against Islamic State militants. Now the Trump administration has thrown its weight behind Syria's new leadership in Damascus, leaving the SDF without backing in the face of a Syrian army offensive. Within weeks, it has lost most of the territory it controlled in northeastern Syria. In remaining SDF strongholds, like Qamishli, tensions are high. Kurdish volunteers have set up checkpoints and are patrolling the streets.
We, just like the rest of our people, are facing an extraordinary situation, which is the war that erupted. So we came out to support our fighters, and we want to send a message to our people all around the world. We assure you that we do our best here.
Outside another Kurdish stronghold, al-Hol, Syrian government forces have been deployed. The message is that they're ready to keep on fighting if the SDF rejects the Syrian government's political demands. Islamist President Ahmed al-Sharaa wants to bring Kurdish-held areas and fighters under state control. For over a decade, SDF-run areas have been autonomous, and they've resisted giving that up as Sharaa seeks to bring stability to a post-Assad Syria. But the Kurds' leverage in negotiations has rapidly dwindled. Key oil fields captured by the SDF are now under central government control, along with prisons and camps holding Islamic State militants and their families. Fearing a new outbreak of fighting, the US military has been transferring detained Islamic State militants across the border into neighbouring Iraq, amid concerns they could escape and pose a security threat. Washington has also been pushing the SDF to reach a deal with the Syrian government, as it pins its hopes on Sharaa to rebuild Syria.
Now, for more on the situation there, let's bring in Aslı Aydıntaşbaş. She's with the Brookings Institution, that's a think tank in Washington, D.C., and she joins us from there. Aslı, Kurds and the Syrian government had just reached an agreement to extend the ceasefire by 15 days. What does that mean for the Kurds now?
Well, I think the Kurds will have to decide whether to take the deal that's on the table or not. It's not the deal they want. It's not the vision they want. But having lost so much property and so much territory and under such a siege, I think their options are limited. They also are facing the fact that United States is considering full withdrawal from Syria. That means that would really leave the Kurdish forces there very vulnerable. So they have to decide. And the decision is whether they want to fold their armed militia into the new Syrian army, the structures of the new Syrian army, and sort of accept a very diluted form of local administration, no longer autonomy or federation, but sort of a very diluted form of autonomy or local administration for a much smaller area. It's not an easy decision. It's all happened very fast. And I think the Kurdish leaders in the movement and the broader Kurdish diaspora is now considering whether or not they're going to take the deal on the table, which, to be frank here, is put forward by Syria, but seems to be backed both by Turkey and United Nations.
We come to Turkey in a second, but first let me ask you, given this deal, how realistic is it that this could lead to a genuine political inclusion of the Kurds into Syria rather than just having Damascus ruling over their territory?
That's a very good question. And I think that's the key question. According to some Kurdish activists and political parties, this is tantamount to capitulation. But when you hear proponents of the deal, whether they're in Syria or in Turkey, they say this is asking the Kurdish movement or SDF to transition into a political force and take part in the future of Syria. So you're not going to get a clear answer because you really have two competing visions, one of a decentralized Syria, the other of a very unified and centralized Syria. So I think that's the most difficult decision for Kurdish leaders right now. And to be honest, one thing that is missing from the whole deal, in my assessment, is legal safeguards. In other words, I think, asking Kurds to be part of a new and united Syria is a perfectly reasonable thing, but it has to have legal safeguards and sort of legislative framework that actually guarantees minority rights and so on and so forth. We've heard Damascus and new Syrian President al-Shara talk about Kurdish rights in a very historic speech 2 weeks ago, but that's been more sort of a verbal commitment. And I think one of the things that would be a sweetener for this deal to move forward would be actually putting forward constitutional or legislative ideas that might help Kurds take that big leap forward, not just the Kurds, I will say, but also perhaps the Druze down the line.
I have to ask you for a very, very brief answer. We are running out of time, but where's Turkey in all of this?
Well, Turkey is happy with the developments. It's long thought that Kurds have too big a territory and too much autonomy. This is in 100 hours, it has seen the Kurdish autonomy and territorial control shrink in rapid, lightning force by Syrian forces, backed, no doubt, backed by Turkey. But it also now faces its own dilemma, which is it started a very fragile peace process with Kurds, with the PKK.
I'm afraid I have to cut you off here. We're really running out of time. I'm very sorry for this. Thank you very much, Aslı Aydıntaşbaş there. Thank you, Aslı. Tens of thousands of protesters have marched in cities across Europe in solidarity with the Kurds in Syria. 20,000 people took to the streets of Cologne in Germany, calling for the protection of civilians. Kurds in Syria have accused government troops of attacks on their people after Damascus launched an offensive to bring the Kurdish-administered region back under its control. Syria's government just announced that the 4-day truce between the government and Kurdish fighters will be extended for another 15 days. Meanwhile, as government forces advanced this week, the Kurds withdrew from the al-Hol camp. That's the biggest facility housing relatives of suspected IS members. The fate of the women and children there now hangs in the balance.